Will the Americans be able to take this away from the rest of the field, or who else will step up? These questions will all be answered very shortly.
And the Americans, no doubt, on a high from winning the final Olympic qualification regatta. But we move to lane 1 here, Netherlands. Rinks, Molenaar, De Graaf, Van de Kerkhoff, Van Doorn, Nab, Van der Beek, Maka and Cox Vetter. In lane 2, Germany on the rebuild in their 8. Egling, Vollard, Roggensack, Kaman, John, Johansson, Schröder, Ochik, Wiesen, coached by Sabine Schage. Lane 3, Great Britain. Can they make amends for the preliminary race? Carnegie, Gibbs, Boulding, Dawson, Yules, Digby, Rudkin, Ford and Brightmore in the Cox seat. The Aussies, the Australian team arriving last week, still settling in here in Europe. The men's 8 picking up the bronze medal last year, but a new look lineup here. Canham, Hicks, Turren, Purnell, Hargraves, O'Brien, Dawson, Whitcomb, Brody in the Coxon seat. And the USA, Hollingsworth, Russia, Tabash, Dean, Carlson, Chatain, Olsen, Quinton, Milne, coached by Casey Galvanek.
So the Americans have done that thing that surprises the rest of the field sometimes when they've come across. They've done that qualifying regatta on Tuesday, taken that place at the Olympic Games, having been 6th at the World Championships last year. And then from the qualifying race, or the prelim race, they came past Tom Ford and this crew from Great Britain. Tom Ford, his sister Emily, just won that silver medal in the women's 8. But now the rest of the world's arrived, the Americans and the Australians, of course, coached by Mark Prater. He's got 3 of that gold medal, 4 from Tokyo, sitting in the 3, 4 and 5 seat now in that Australian 8. Got bronze in 2023 and will be looking to step up now. And again, all of these 8s cranking into motion like 5 locomotives, steaming up, getting longer and longer as the stroke rate comes up, the stroke length comes up. And it looks fairly even across the field there. Taking a look, you can see the stroke rates for yourself. If anything, it is the Americans who've jumped out there with Great Britain.
Yeah, the Americans blasting out of the start. The Australians a little bit more patient, but they're going to have to be careful here because they have the world champions off to their right. In Great Britain, they have the Americans who smashed that preliminary race off to their left. But everything to play for here as we ride here with the Americans. They've qualified for the Olympic Games through final qualification. We know that the Kiwis did that, went on to win the gold medal at the Olympic Games. Will the Americans be able to make a repeat of what happened in Tokyo? But it looks as though the British, who won't be caught napping this time, I think that they may have their bow ball just slightly out in front.
I think you're right. I think Great Britain are just slightly in front as we look in the face there of Peter Quinton in that stroke seat. Taking a look out to their right, what they will see is that Great Britain have stolen, what, about 1/3 of a length on them and the Australians. The Australians have also really showed up here, Sarah. I'm sure you'll be pleased to see this progress.
Yeah, we see Kendall Brody, the coxswain of the Australian men's 8 there, urging the crew on. She knows she's got the world champions and she needs to go with them. They'll be wanting to shut down the Americans early, but look at the Dutch, also their bow up in it, as are the Germans.
Well, the Great Britain 8 will have been shocked to not be at the front of the field in that preliminary race. The Americans are looking ominous. They're 9 meters back. This won't be what they want for themselves. This is an ominous difference in this race compared to what it was like in that preliminary. The Australians hanging right in there. The Dutch and the Germans, well, they were a long way back in the preliminary race. I've got to say, I thought for the British, they looked good compared to their other European competitors. The surprise was what had come from the rest of the world, particularly in the shape of the Stars and Stripes of the United States.
Well, the Aussies are locked bow ball for bow ball here with the Americans. A much better show up for them. A big step on from the preliminary race as they're settling into life here in Europe, which they'll be living through to the Paris Games in the Australian men's 8. As you mentioned, Greg, the big change for this year, of course, is the 3 champions in the men's 4 from Paris coming into this boat. Jack Hargraves, Spencer Taran and Alex Purnell. But as they come through the 1,000-metre mark, Britain have taken this race by the scruff of the neck. Bow ball for bow ball, the USA and Australia. The Dutch desperately trying to get themselves back into this race.
Yeah, it doesn't look that clean in the Dutch boat, does it? Those finishes look like they're coming a little bit loose. Just taking a look, Great Britain are continuing to move. Great Britain certainly won the second 500 and moved on the rest of the field. America, though, I think are looking to move now in this third quarter. America clearly in second place. All the crews at 39 strokes a minute, except Great Britain, who are at 37 right now.
We're riding here with the Germans, but they're sitting back in 5th place. They're struggling to find the form that made them so dominant for so many years. But here come the Dutch. The Australians are going to have a challenge from the Dutch over on the far side of the course.
Well, we certainly know the Dutch can sprint. It was way back at the European Championships in 2022 where they had a terrible mishap early on and then came flying back against the rest of the field. But this field has moved on as we look now at this Australian crew who are trying to live with the pace. But it's Great Britain who are continuing to move on the rest of the field. We had a look there, Sholto Carnegie in the bow seat. We now look at Tom Ford in the stroke seat. Determination on their faces as they look to churn it out and hold the Americans. But the Americans have won the third quarter. Who is going to win this fourth and all-important quarter, get that bow ball in front by the finish line?
Well, if the Australians are going to go, they're going to have to do it now. We see Jack O'Brien there in the 6th seat. Hi to everyone from Walgett who are no doubt watching this race. Can the Aussies get themselves a little look across from Alex Purnell, the Olympic champion from Tokyo? They can see the Dutch coming down the far side of the course. It's still the British in the lead, absolutely driving it down here.
Well, the British are digging as deep as they possibly can now. They'll be desperate to hit the red buoys. They'll be desperate for the finish line to come because the Americans, I think, are on the move. The gap is getting smaller. Great Britain are still only up at 39 strokes a minute. You know there's going to be speed work to come for them at altitude in the build-up in a viz to the Olympic Games. But that is irrelevant today. Today it's about keeping that bow ball in front of the charging Dutch who have got into bronze medal position and the charging Americans who are starting to close their gap. You can see it's down to 6 meters. It was 10 meters. Here we go. Tom Ford coming down towards this finish line, backed up by James Rudkin. In the coxing seat, Harry Brightmore begging them for more, begging for them to stay ahead. But America are charging in towards the finish line, but the finish line is going to come, I think, just in time for Great Britain. And it is going to be Great Britain who take that by nothing over the United States. The Dutch had a great last quarter, great second half. Australia and Germany back there. But they are absolutely spent in that Great Britain boat. You can see what it means there. Fist pumps, the digging deep. A great finish from Great Britain just to hang on.
Wow. What a race there by the British. They went out, they knew what they had to do, and lucky they did because those Americans were absolutely flying down to the line. But the British, the world champions, take the win. The Americans, after the disappointment of the World Championships last year, get a final qualifying position and now a silver medal at this World Cup. The Dutch were absolutely flying in that final quarter, Greg, to get that bronze medal.
Well, the rest of the world were flying back really at the British 8. Just looking at these times here, the Americans took 2 seconds off Great Britain in the last 500. I mean, 2 seconds of an 8, that's nearly a full boat length. But they took 2 seconds off the British. Looking at the Dutch, they took a second off the British in the last 500. So partly it was the British were tying up, partly it was that the Americans came back so well at the end. I've got to say, I think that really sets it up for the Paris Olympics. The Americans have had to race 3 times. You know, their big race was to make sure they qualified for the Games on Tuesday. They've then had another race on Friday where they probably did surprise us all really by winning the preliminary race, and they won that by about half a length. And now they're having to perform again at the absolute top of their game. So Great Britain, you have been warned. This American 8 are out to get you. You're not going to have this all your own way. Harry Brightmore there looking across from the coxing seat. Tom Ford taking a look. He'll be very pleased to see that that gap was a few centimetres in the right direction. Not quite sure what Harry said there. I think it was very well rowed or something like that.
Sounds like a very British thing to say, Greg.
Yeah, I think I was lip reading the best I could. I think that was what he was. He went to Oxford Brook, so I'm sure it would have been something very polite to say well done and thanks for coming. It's not quite 3 cheers, but that sort of thing. So you can see the Great Britain fans were probably worried after the preliminary race, but confirmation there that narrow win for Great Britain ahead of the United States and the Netherlands.
Let's hear it for our medalists.